Hey everyone, it's Jen from Midnightsky Fibers, and this is the question and answer section for November 1st. Okay, the first question is, what are the hand-spun yarn samples? So Midnightsky Fibers has hand-spun yarn samples. They're usually up. They are free with $1 shipping, and they are several yards of hand-spun yarn. It really varies as to what the type of hand-spun yarn is. It could be anything from coils to a plain single to just an uber novelty yarn. It could be vegan, it could be wool, it could be applied, pretty much anything. It's just samples that I've taken from when I'm winding off the end of a skein of yarn, or when I've had a yarn around for a while, I might make it into samples. But you can request the samples for Midnightsky Fibers yarns on the Midnightsky Fibers website, which is midnightskyfibers.com, and those are for US only. Next, people have wondered what my knitting patterns look like on the Kindle. As many of you probably already know, many of the knitting patterns for Midnightsky Fibers are available for the Kindle, with the exception of a couple of the charted patterns. Charts don't show up really well just because the space is limited across the top, so really large charts don't really show up on the Kindle very well. But most of the other patterns that are not charted or that only have small charts are on the Kindle. So this is a picture of the circle vest pattern, of what the circle vest looks like. You can see the text at the top there that's a little bit, nice and dark. The pattern for the circle vest is actually in a little bit of a lighter text, but it's still readable. The circle vest pattern, most of the hat patterns, and a couple of the lace wrap patterns and the French press cozy patterns are all up on Amazon. Just search Midnightsky Fibers. And of course they're all also available as a PDF on my website as well. The next question is, some people were wondering in a recent Facebook chat what the difference between roving versus top versus bats are. I was talking about spinning some new sock yarn and how I specifically wanted a top, and that I wasn't interested in processing it myself since it's kind of time intensive. And people were wondering why I would want to do a top instead of a roving. A top is a fiber that looks a lot like a roving, but the fibers are all aligned in the same direction. It means that it can spin really finely and really smoothly. It's for worsted weight spinning usually, and it makes for, in this case, a very strong, very dense yarn the way I'm spinning it. Roving has fibers going every direction. It doesn't usually dye as well as top because it tends to felt a little bit, but it's how a lot of fibers for wool and spinning, or how it's the fibers that you get when you order fiber from a small wool mill. That's usually how your fiber is going to come. Roving is also used to describe top if you're using a lot of commercial roving, so usually closer to top than they are the mismatched, misaligned fibers of roving. Like for example, most of the rovings that I sell on my site are nearly top but not quite. They aren't perfectly aligned. There's still work for fine spinning, but they're not the perfectly aligned, all the fibers the same length that top would normally be. Bats are different than the other two because they're very wide, and the fibers can either be going all in the same direction or both directions. Bats are what a lot of fiber artists sell because it's an extra step to process it into roving. And bats mean that you can get a really nice wide variety of different colors and fibers all blended into one bat. You can have everything from really finely carded bats that are wide, which are great because you can pull off pieces vertically or horizontally or however you want to spin them. You can also get novelty yarn bats, which are carded so that they have big chunks of fiber in them, which is great for spinning novelty yarn. Next question is, what is the difference between Angelina and Firestar? Both Angelina and Firestar are sparkly fibers that people use to add a little bit of shine instead of using silk or bamboo or soy silk. It's when you want even more of a shine to it. So Angelina is made by Textura. It's heat bondable, which means that if you were to iron it, making sure that you don't have your iron directly on it, of course, it will bond together. And it is also super sparkly. It's both light reflective and refractive. It's available in a huge range of colors. I think there's like at least 40 colors at this point. But it is more expensive than Firestar, and you can't really dye it. It wouldn't like that, and since it's sensitive to heat, that would probably not really end well. It's it's okay if you dye it when it's already mixed in with a little bit of another yarn, but dyeing it by itself wouldn't really go well. You probably wouldn't be able to dye it at all. What's really great about Angelina is that you can use just 1 to 2% per weight of the fiber, and you'll get something that's really, really sparkly. And that they have a lot of different colors of Angelina that are translucent but still really sparkly, so they blend in while still being sparkly. And they also have ones that are also made of metal. The downside of Angelina is that it's not meant to add strength. Like the Firestar, it's not a strong fiber. You don't really want to spin a yarn out of it just out of itself. It's probably not going to hold together super well, or you'll be spinning it so tightly that you won't really get a bunch of the sparkle. It tends to be blended in or added in as like blobs or slubs in fairly small amounts, so it really shows it off really well. Firestar, on the other hand, is much better for adding strength. It's not as sparkly as Angelina, but it's also a lot less expensive. It's nylon, and it's also called Icicle. Most of the Firestar that you see is from Ashland Bay, which sells both plain white Firestar in different colors and different multicolored, so you'll get like say green, brown, and yellow together in the same roving-like form of Firestar. You can dye it, but you want to be careful that you're not dyeing it at high temperature. It's best usually with acid dyes. You're not going to get the same color as you would with a wool or a silk because everything dyes to a different shade, but it will dye. It's available in a number of colors, and it's really actually pretty inexpensive. If you're blending it into something like for a sock yarn, you're going to get something that's pretty sparkly. It's not going to be as sparkly as Angelina, but it's going to be great for if you want that sparkle and that strength. You can also use it like you would for Angelina for adding blobs or slubs, which I did in a vegan yarn recently, which is quite fun, but it's not going to have quite the same sparkle factor. Next question, carbonized bamboo. What is it and how is it different from regular bamboo? So carbonized bamboo is similar to the typical bamboo that you normally see for fiber artists. That's the exuded bamboo that's made in the same way that rayon is made through a chemical process. It's not retted. There's bamboo that's available that's retted. But carbonized bamboo is made much in the same way that the regular bamboo fiber that you have, that you've probably seen is made, except the fiber is baked, which creates this perfect carbon copy of the fiber, which is this wonderful steel gray, very matte, it's very soft, it has beautiful drape, but it's not going to be shiny. I've seen people describing carbonized bamboo fiber for spinning as shiny, and that would be incorrect. It's not shiny, it's not black. It's called black gold or black diamond in the industry, but it's not a black. It's definitely a gray. My cat's black, and if I were to hold him up to it, this is definitely quite a bit lighter in color. It spins very smoothly. Otherwise, it's the fiber length and spinnability is about the same as bamboo. Otherwise, it's actually probably a little bit easier to spin because it's matte, so you have a little bit more of a texture to it when you're trying to hold on to it to spin, which makes it really interesting to spin. It's great for vegan yarns when you're trying to get a nice dark color without dyes. Next question, since we were on the discussion of what type of socks I was knitting, and since I'm spinning sock yarn, I love making hand knit socks, but unlike most people, I do not make many lace or cable knit socks. I'm really boring in my socks. I tend to like very plain, like the traditional basic toes and heels, a little bit of ribbing at the top, not too long. I don't like them lacy or cabled because I wear my socks really hard, and I don't want to use anything that will get rubbed through and get holes quickly, or that'll create a thicker section that'll hurt when I wear them, when I stick them in heels or something. I tend to also use fairly basic sock yarn. I'll use occasional fancy sock yarn, but I'm really a fan of the 100% wool or hand-spun sock yarns. I'm not a huge fan of superwash, not a huge fan of the silk blends. I think they're really pretty, but I like the plain sock yarn. I think it's a lot of fun to spin the sock yarn, especially since I have a Lundrum wheel with a very, very fine flyer that spins really fast. So I can spin sock yarn relatively quickly and quite finely, and I like to use this size 0 double pointed needles for it. I don't really like to use anything thicker than a sock weight yarn for socks ever, even for slipper socks, because if you can't put them in shoes, I am not going to wear them. Next question. Mill ends are now up on my site, and people want to know what they are. Mill ends is anything that comes from the processing. When you're processing the wool, it's what's left over or been rejected from the mill. So it's usually what it is. It's the ends of fiber when they're going through and processing and carding or spinning it into yarn, and you get to an end and there's not enough for it to go through and to keep feeding it through properly, or there's pieces where something misses and it's not quite perfect and it's just too much trouble for them to try and rescue it. So mill ends are usually a little bit of everything. It's everything from clouds, which are like bats but even more fluffy, to things that are like that are a little bit of a roving, to pieces that have had a little bit of the yarn spun on one edge of them. They are really great for felting and textured spinning, not so good for dyeing, since there are a lot of different ends going every direction and the ends are different lengths. So, and there's quite a bit of dust and shorter fibers in it, which are fine, it spins right out, but it's not so good for dyeing because it tends to felt a little bit too much. It's better to dye at the end of spinning than before. It's also a great filler for felting or stuffing as well if you're trying to get that natural wool. These ones are from Brown Sheep, which is a US-based wool mill, which is pretty awesome. And final question of the day is quick knits for fall projects. So it's getting time to be holiday season. Today is the day after Halloween. I hope everyone had as much fun with it as I did. They're definitely Seattle and Capitol Hill. It's definitely a 3-day event of all the bars being open quite late. So now it's time to get on to the holiday gift knitting and the quick fall projects of the oh crap I need a hat variety. So my favorite fast fall projects are of course hats, both just for fall knitting and for gifts because they're fast. They don't take very much yarn. You know, you can get a hat out of 50 yards of bulky yarn, 100 yards to 200 yards of pretty much any DK or worsted weight yarn. You can make them fancy, you can make them cabled, you can make them out of lace, you can make them plain, you can make them square, you can make them rectangular. You know, whatever your skill level is, you can make a hat. People wear hats. And it's not such an expensive project that if you give it as a gift and someone doesn't wear it, that it's the end of the world, where if you knit someone a sweater and they never wear it, it tends to make you pretty unhappy. So that's everything for today. Make sure you check out midnightskyfibers.com for the knitting patterns we talked about today, including the circle knitting vest and for the handspun yarn samples. Midnightsky Fibers also has different free projects for hats if you are looking for a pattern for a free hat. Thanks for listening.